Good morning, everybody. Today is the 25th of July. You're listening to the Drake Martinez podcast, and I'm your host. Today, we're going to be talking about the aftermath of the Trump assassination attempt, as well as the coup d'etat in the Democratic Party. Okay, so there's been a lot of things happening. I know I wanted to digest the information before I came out and talked about it and gave my analysis and gave my point of view of what's been going on, but it's been a really crazy few weeks, and it's about to get crazier for sure. This isn't just going to be like chill after the election. It's not like the election is going to happen and then people are going to be like, okay, well, that's the president, that's the people that everyone decided, and everything's going to be chaos for sure, going all the way probably until 2028 is what I predict. And things even might get crazier after that, or they might get calmer. We don't really know. It's impossible to tell, but for sure, in my opinion, things are not just going to let up. And so there's been just so many developments. So I've been trying to digest them, trying to think about what's been going on, think about like the historical context, think about analogies that have happened in the past, and how those can like guide our thinking going into what these chaotic events that have happened, because this is like very reminiscent of the late 1960s, early 1960s, all the way up into the mid 70s. And of course, things were just like chaos for like a decade or longer. And things didn't calm down until the 80s, 90s. And we had like peaceful period, a relatively peaceful period. Even though the Cold War was going on, it was like dying down. And then we had the war on terrorism and 9/11, and then like all these other things are just like hyper accelerated into like the American empire as opposed to like the American Republic, in my opinion. So lots of crazy things that are developing. History is moving at light speed right now, and this chaotic period will lead eventually to a peaceful period, but we need to get through it first. That's the only way. And I wanted to bring up some historical analogies because like these things have just been like really on my mind. So first I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about the current events, the things that are happening now. So you can listen to so many different people that'll give you the play-by-play, but I like to have context for what's happening in America so that we don't lose sight of like who we were as we go into the future. So we know like, hey, these things have happened before. Like when they say like, oh, the contested January 6th incident, it's like, well, I was alive and remember what happened in 2000 when we didn't have a president after the election for like a month and a half or longer, I think it was, because Al Gore contested the election. He was like, hey, recount the votes in Florida. And no one called him an election denier. It was like, hey, like, why wouldn't you want that to be accurate? If you have questions, if you have grievances, like this is a country, this is an open and free society, and we should be able to voice those opinions. And especially a presidential candidate, because they pour so much money and energy and time into that, and if the votes weren't counted correctly in that state, then, or at least if you don't think that they were, then you have the right to contest it, which is essentially what Trump was saying. And it shouldn't have been as big of a deal because, again, we have historical precedents for that happened only about like 25 years ago. And there have been many cases before in the past that were very similar. But I digress. So let's get back into some of the other historical context for what's been happening. Obviously, there's been a lot of presidential assassinations, but the one that brings to my mind, not that Trump got assassinated, obviously he didn't get assassinated, but the Secret Service failure, the attempt on the president's life, the historical context of what's been happening, the role of the intelligence agencies, for example, CIA, FBI, in this scenario, as well as what this means for the country, the opposition, and all these questions, all these scenarios come up in 1963 with JFK's assassination. And again, we go back to a time when the Democrats are a different type of party. They're not the Communist Party of today. They're almost like Republican light today, if by like sort of like historical context, like comparison. And John F. Kennedy, is a young, promising politician. He's in his first term. He's in his first, I think, 1,000 days of his presidency, and I'm pretty sure around there, and then he gets killed. He had lots of issues with the CIA, and as time goes on, fewer and fewer people believe the official narrative from the Warren Commission, which is that a lone gunman, many people have heard this, Lee Harvey Oswald, shot and killed JFK. And I was watching, and I would encourage, if you have not seen this, I'm pretty sure you can watch it on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's free. And it's called Dark Legacy. And this gives the most in-depth, this is the most in-depth documentary that you can find, that I've been able to find. If you have another one, that would be great, that you could recommend it. But this one has the most knowledge, the most research that illustrates not just how he was killed, but who was behind it, and how they worked together and their backgrounds. So I don't want to go too crazy into it, but essentially you need to watch it if you haven't seen it before. There's one point in which he kind of turns off the interview when a doctor is giving his assessment of the JFK autopsy, where I wish he could have just played the full interview, but the information is very solid nonetheless. And essentially the premise of the documentary is that the CIA killed JFK, and it was a coup d'etat, and they killed the sitting elected president. A number of people were involved, what we would now call the deep state. And this deep state took over because JFK wasn't playing ball. He wasn't working with the intelligence agencies. He wasn't working with the military-industrial complex to do what they wanted him to do, which is war. That's what they're there for. They're there to engage in warfare. They're there to engage in covert black ops affairs abroad. And he was like, I don't really like this. I don't like what you guys are doing. You're bringing us on a brink of war with the Soviets. They thought that, and of course the CIA thought that he was being naive. And according to this documentary, which I think is very compelling, and my personal belief, which is that they thought that he was in the way, that he was naive, and that he needed to be eliminated in order for America to truly prosper and to be safe. Of course, that's BS. Operating in the shadows like that, assassinating the legitimately duly elected president is a coup d'etat. It's against the will of the people. They have voted for that person. They wanted him in, and they wanted the policies that he was advocating for. And of course, JFK turned out to be a monumental president even in his 3 years. And in his death, he was able to accomplish something that is just remarkable, in that he stood up for government by the people, for the people. And he wasn't going to be controlled by these 3-letter agencies that he's supposed to control. That's his job. His job is to control them. His job is to be their boss. And they were like, no, we're your boss. We've been around way longer than you. We're going to be here way longer than you, after you're gone. So you do what we say. And he was like, no, I have the power that was given to me by the people, and the authority is laid out very clearly in the Constitution. And so some of the actors that he talks about in the documentary is George H.W. Bush and his long-term association with OSS, and then the eventual creation of the CIA. That his dad, a little-known fact, but is very, very true. You can even go on Wikipedia and find it out, that his dad, Prescott Bush, was a U.S. senator, and during the war, during World War II, his bank was seized by the FBI as a Nazi asset. That they were a long-time provider of financial support, to the Nazi regime. And in that covert operations background, that not just his dad, but everybody in his circle at Yale, Skull and Bones, had, that they had this network of of association of secrecy with amongst themselves. And this pops up over and over and over again with many degrees of association in the CIA when the CIA is eventually developed, not just when it starts to transform from OSS into CIA, and then once it becomes fully operational into the 1960s, 1950s, and then into the 1960s. So very, very fascinating document and gets into a lot of that kind of stuff. So we have the JFK assassination. Who takes over after him? Well, his vice president. His vice president takes over, and Lyndon B. Johnson, and this is sort of like, which is ironic, is like a very contextual situation of what's just happened with Joe Biden. He's a deeply unpopular president, and he has to withdraw from the election. He does not seek the nomination, and similar to Joe Biden, but different in a very similar crucial circumstance or aspect, which is that once Lyndon Johnson no longer seeks the nomination, his vice president Hubert Humphrey decides to seek the nomination. Now he goes through the process normally, and he gets votes, and then he gets the delegates. Dissimilar to Biden, who has all the delegates, drops them, and presumptively Kamala Harris is going to take them. We're going to get more into that other coup d'etat that just happened a few days ago a little bit. But you can see the historical analogies here, right? On one side, you have an assassination, and then you have a president that's stepping down, and then you have the vice president losing in an election to Richard Nixon. What happens to Richard Nixon? Well, this is very fascinating. For a lot of people who don't know this, the only president that was never elected is Gerald Ford. And what happened was Nixon becomes elected, he gets reelected, and he's killing it. Like, I think he won like an enormous landslide victory when he sought reelection. The people were very happy with his style of governance. People love Nixon at the time. And then he gets Watergate. He has the Watergate scandal. After the Watergate scandal, prior to the Watergate scandal, he had to fire his vice president. I think it was Spiro Agnew, if I remember correctly. Kind of going off the top of my head, I don't have my computer open, but I'm pretty sure it was Spiro Agnew. After Spiro Agnew is fired or resigned, I can't really remember, he takes on Gerald Ford. After Gerald Ford becomes vice president, Nixon resigns in disgrace after the Watergate scandal, which would barely make the news today. But nevertheless, he resigns, and Gerald Ford comes into power. And with Gerald Ford comes a whole slew of deep state actors. Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld. All these guys ride his coattails into his cabinet and into power. And when did they poke their head back up again? With George W. Bush. Bush the Younger. So a lot of what happened with Nixon that time, although I have mixed opinions about Nixon. He might have even been minimally involved in the JFK assassination. He at least knew about it for sure, about the truth of what happened that day. But nevertheless, he was a popular president, and the coup d'etat that happened with his resignation, and then this vice president that nobody voted for comes in, and then he brings all these like shady actors in with him that are responsible for the neocon warhawk policies that stretch all the way into from mid to late 1970s all the way into 2007. These guys, these are the deep state actors that they're talking about. This network of behind the scenes operators, theorists, people like Zbigniew Brzezinski, people like Henry Kissinger. All these people are that is the deep state. These people who just keep poking their heads up. Doesn't matter which administration it is. They could be 30, 40-year gaps. They keep poking their heads up. And yeah, I mean, Zbigniew Brzezinski, there's just so many of them. But this is the biggest example that of like of a political coup d'état that we've seen in recent or quasi recent U.S. political history. Now, let's get into the parallels of what's going on today. So we have the Trump administration, and the Trump administration goes through January 6th. It gets, COVID, the COVID years, all that kind of stuff. And now we have the Biden administration. And a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago now, President Donald Trump was at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. And at this rally, he was shot in the ear by a 20-year-old, like, pale skin, like, stringy hair, greasy looking dude. And they all have that same, like, Prozac look to them. I hate to say it, but they all do. Like, they never look like fit, like, handsome guys. They all just have like that weird, like, school shooter look. I'm sorry to say, but this kid just kind of like fits that, like, patsy mold. And I'm not saying he wasn't involved. I'm saying that it doesn't make sense that this kid was able to penetrate the security the way that he was able to penetrate the Secret Service security, climb up on a ladder, shoot at the president, and get off like 6 shots before he's then killed. I think he had help. I think that people were guiding him, just like with Parkland, just like with the 1993 World Trade Center bombings, just like the governor from Michigan. I forgot. I'm pretty sure it's Michigan. How the FBI just like continuously is involved in guiding these actors. And it makes sense as a premise, right? That they would be like, okay, well, let's try to find terrorists. Let's go out there and try to sell bombs to people, and then if they buy them, then we got them. But they go like way further than that, and it just keeps happening over and over and over again. So I doubt that this kid worked alone. He might have been the lone shooter, but I doubt that he got to the position without help. I seriously doubt it. And it's a shame. It's a shame that we live in a country where, like, we can even, like, reasonably have these thoughts. I mean, like, given what happened with JFK. JFK was assassinated and killed. Ronald Reagan was shot. And people have been saying that they want to kill Trump for almost 8 years now. Or 8 or more years. And then someone tried to kill him. And there's just like so many irregularities in the security detail. There's so many irregularities in terms of like the knowledge of like what we have about this shooter, the knowledge about like his inner circle of friends, or people that he might have associated with. It's like the whole thing got buried. The whole thing is just like move on. It's that wouldn't be the case if the roles were reversed, right? That everyone would want to know, like, who knew about this kid? Did they report anything about him? Was there any kind of like reasonable suspicion that this kid like was gonna do what he did? Is there any evidence that he was contacted by FBI, other federal government agencies? And of course, what's he doing in this weird BlackRock commercial? Also, like, how was he able to get off this, like, I know a lot of people are saying, like, it's an easy shot, but, like, he had iron sights. It's a stressful situation. And he was just, like, encountering a police officer. So, like, what sort of training did he either put himself through or did other people put him through in order to be able to operate the way that he did alone that day? It doesn't make any sense. I do have to say, though, that in hindsight, I'm really proud of Trump and the way that he has been handling it, because he's handled this near-death experience with so much grace and with so much purpose that it's like evident on his face. Like you could see it when he was accepting the nomination for the Republican Party at the RNC, that he was just like, his face was just like all purpose. His eyes just like knew, you could just see in his eyes like, yep, I have this enormous responsibility that's been placed on my shoulders to run for president of the United States, and win an election that has severe, drastic consequences. And people's lives are at stake. Not just now, not just the guy that was killed, the guy that was trying to that protected his family, but the future generations are going, this is a very pivotal point in our history as a nation. And you could see the weight of that on his face. You could see the weight of that and hear the weight of that in his words, that he knew what was happening. And for a person that's dwelled a lot on his legal battles, which he should, honestly, because it was just total trash, but to dwell on it in your mind and to dwell on it in your word is a different thing. At least in the public also. I mean, it's tough to talk about this without, because there's just like, there's so many different angles, there's so many different approaches. Like, they attacked him in terms of like lawfare, and he beat pretty much every single one of those cases. And some of them he might have like lost, but they had such a minimal impact on his ability to still campaign, still talk to the people, still get his rallies out, get his message out, and let Biden, hang himself. Politically speaking, of course. I'm not talking about, physical. I'm talking about like he's setting himself up. He then takes the debate when the odds are stacked against him in terms of like how it's set up, who are the moderators, all those things were disproportionately favored Biden, obviously because those are the rules that he insisted upon. But Trump was like, you know what, all I want to do is have my moment to debate this guy, and then look what happened. And honestly, I think Kamala is a weaker candidate. I think right now she's going to go through a big boost. They're going to try to boost her as much as they can. But nothing is ever going to live down that. Nothing is ever going to take away from that image of him being shot at and then like raising his fist into the air with the American flag behind him. No one will ever forget that for as long as we live. Not even some media propaganda pump from, trying to prop up this really disingenuous politician, I hate to say. But in any event, Trump handled this situation with a lot of grace, and instead of publicly attacking the Secret Service, he's thanked them. He's thanked the ones that like were there that day that protected him, and he's grateful for them. You can legitimately see that and hear that in his voice, which is beautiful. For a man that can take that moment and attack them, he didn't. That shows a lot of composure, a lot of grace, and a lot of discipline from Trump. That he's focusing his attacks. He's becoming more and more focused as the campaign goes on, which is one of my like private criticisms of him is just like how unfocused he can be in terms of like his political messaging and all that. So that's really great to see. So I think just like with most people, like these like trying and challenging times with just like so much evil and so many crazy things happening, that it's creating a stronger nation, it's creating a stronger purpose in the people that want freedom, the people that want liberty, the people that want the republic, the Constitution, and want this way of life that we've known about ever since we were young. And now that we're older and coming into the position to to take these systems over, we're like, well, this is trash. How did these previous generations screw it up so much? And that's not to say that like the millennials and Gen Z are like perfect. There's a lot of significant problems with them too, but there's just like a political system that has been eroded for decades. And this movement is the one movement that is so legitimate in terms of like trying to reestablish that Americana way of life, the culture, the language, the borders, the way of life of America. And I'm proud to be part of that movement. I'm proud to be part of that movement for many, many years. And will always be part of that movement. And I think a lot of you guys out there are either part of it or on the fence or maybe on the other side of the aisle, and we welcome you. We welcome if you're on the other side of the aisle to embrace America, to embrace our language, our culture, and our borders, and to embrace what it means to be an American, what it means to defend the Constitution against enemies both foreign and domestic, and to perpetuate this way of life that we've been given, that we've been blessed to be given, and to bestow it upon onto our children, because that's what we're here to do. That's what I'm here to do. I have a child, and I want that America that I remember from the 90s to be given to her. It wasn't perfect, but it was amazing. And I want her to have that and more. And I know that a lot of you out there are like that too. And the only way we're going to get there is by respecting each other as Americans, respecting the rule of law, and coming together in a sort of sense that we just can't come together with communists. It's just not going to happen. That is an enemy faction of the United States. And people who act that way, people who don't respect elections, people who don't respect the rule of law, they can't be part of that political process. They just can't. They're not playing the game. They're playing a different game. They're playing the subversion game. And that leads us to the attempted or the actual coup d'etat on President Biden. So earlier I mentioned this. The closest analogy in history, or at least in recent history, is the Lyndon B. Johnson resignation. I'm sorry, not resignation. He withdrew from the from his candidacy, and this happened before there was the primary election. So his vice president, Hubert Humphrey, took over, and he won the nomination and then won the delegates, and went on to lose, like I said, to Nixon. Now, what makes this different to Kamala Harris, obviously, is that Kamala Harris did not get the delegates that Biden did. Those were his delegates. So I think that the best way that the Democrats can just create the lineage, the transfer of those delegates, is that he doesn't just resign from, or he doesn't just end his candidacy, Biden, that Biden also resigns as president, obviously because he wanted to do it. And if he's not able to run his campaign, then how can he run the country? Obviously, a lot of people are saying that. I'm sure you guys have been hearing this from everybody, but it doesn't negate the fact that it's a very powerful reason as to why he should no longer be the president. That his mental faculties are clearly not there. They haven't been for years now, and she's complicit in that cover-up. She's complicit in the fact that the country is being run by a person that can't do it. And I have people who work under me, and I have a number of people who work on me. It's 20 people or so, and I don't really know them that well. I just kind of got there to my new command, and when you have this group of people that you're responsible to that aren't your family, because at home I have my family for whom I'm responsible and to whom I'm responsible. But when I have a group of people at home and I have a group of people at work that I'm responsible to, manage, and that they'll need me for things, and that I'm part of a team. I don't take that lightly, and I'm sure that no president should ever take that lightly, and the vice president shouldn't take that lightly. So as the vice president, if you're observing this person and you're hey, this person can't do the job, hey, sir, all due respect, I love you as a person. This is purely professional and purely in the interest of the American people, but I'm going to talk with the cabinet members and get you taken out of office. We're going to seek the 25th Amendment because America deserves a leader. That's what the country put you here for, and that's what they expect. And there's plenty of people that can do the job, and I take no pleasure in taking you out, but of your position of authority. But the American people deserve better, and I constantly think that when I'm at work. Like I get my paycheck from the American taxpayer, and I talk to the people that work under me too. I'm like, that it's just there's so much time to be like lazy, like, oh, good enough for government work. But I tell them, I'm like, hey, you know what? The taxpayers paid us to do a job. We're doing the job by doing a little bit of maintenance, like by working out, by doing all these other these things that we're required to do. It's not a whole lot, and let's just earn our paycheck and go home. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Let's take pride and let's hold a bit of respect for the positions in which that we hold. And this woman, Kamala Harris, is like, I don't know how you can observe this man as the vice president and not do it. It just shows such a lack of respect for the office and for the people that work under her and for the people that work under him. Because people need to go to work with purpose and know, like, hey, I'm contributing in a meaningful way without spin, without obfuscation. But that's not what we get with the Democratic Party. And this guy, the president of the United States had to resign from from X, and post some kind of letter and say like, oh yeah, well, I resign. That's it. And I'm going to go eat ice cream and play with Commander for the next day and a half and let you guys just sit on ice and wait until you know that there's a leader leading your country. Come on, man. It's not how things should be run. It's so bad. It's so disgraceful. I'm sorry, but it is. It's disgraceful that this administration is run by people like that have such little respect. Not just for the American people, but like for their office. Do you not have any respect for your job? The one that the taxpayers pay you to do? The one that like thousands of people could do better than you? Like literally thousands of people could do that job better than you. You're the one occupying it. For, however those stars aligned, you're the one occupying that office. But you choose to have such little respect for it. So I digress a little bit. I think that I went off the rails a little, but that's what my heart's been telling me, is that like that this is some scary times, and we're gonna have to get through it. And the only way to get through it is to just continuously talk to people and continuously try to recruit people for Team America, for Team Humanity, and I know that like I remember like back in 2016, like when these conversations were starting to get pretty heated, that there was a lot of like dissing, there was a lot of like, and it has its time and its place. I mean, I know that like political rhetoric and like just debates can get like heated and that's normal, but we should be able to identify those people that are on the fence. We should be able to identify those people that aren't totally gone, and have an open and honest discussion with them, and try to bring them over, and I think that's what the RNC is doing right now. Like they did it's kind of like tough to watch, but at the same time, that's what we need. Like it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch like people who don't completely conform, or like people who don't completely like line up with the orthodoxy, but that's what we need. We need more people to come into the fold, and we need more people to accept the fact that, that we're not going to have a country like this much longer. Okay, well, that's it for today, and I'll see you guys next week. We'll talk about these situations as they unfold. We'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe, like, share with people that you think might enjoy the conversation. Love you guys. Take care.